Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another installment of Experts in Sustainability. This week, we have another titan of sustainability with Peter McMorris. Peter, welcome.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks for everyone who's listening. So I'm Pete McMorris, and I'm an ex-Unilever guy. I worked for Unilever for 20 years. And I'll talk to you a little bit about Unilever as we go through, because that's where all my sustainable knowledge came from. But what I did at Unilever, the last 9 years, I worked in the global side of procurement. So I've been a procurement director for 9 years, working out of different parts of the world, working out of Switzerland, working out of Singapore. I also, in the past, have run big factories, so lots to do with big production sites. But really, over the last 9 years, it became much more about sustainability. The whole way that we thought about in Unilever was about sustainability. So we were like many businesses, we want to double the size of our business. So there's a lot about growth. But at the same time, we wanted to halve our environmental imprint. So, the footprint behind this was supposed to be significantly different than when we went in. Yeah, many years in there, lots to do with the environment, lots to do with sustainability, and I can talk that through with you today, Justin.
Excellent. Thanks for that. So, as I ask everyone who comes on the show, comes into class, I always ask the first two questions of: one, what's your definition of sustainability? And two, what are your top two sustainability development goals?
I mean, business sustainability, you can talk about it a number of different ways, but I'd say this very simply is when a business puts at least back what they took out. There's this whole discussion about, I think in the olden days, if you like, which probably isn't that long ago, people were talking about, oh, we can't do too much, which is bad. But now it's going to be turned around completely and saying you need to put back more than you took out. Yeah, so I think that's a big part of it. And when we think about in Unilever, we actually had three big goals. And those goals were improving the health and the well-being for more than 1 billion people, halving our environmental impact, and enhancing the livelihoods for millions of people. So it's one of those where if you actually start looking at all the UN goals, it covers quite a few of them. I think there's probably about 6 or 7 of them covered by those three. So if anybody ever says to me, what's the most important? Well, there's loads of them which are important in there. You can't just say, I'm not interested in one, but you're interested in others. So, there's lots about the planet, there's loads about society, and there's a lot about what you can do yourself. So what is the impact that you have? So you're looking at water usage, you're looking at greenhouse gases, you're looking at waste, you're looking at landfill in your sites. So you're looking at a lot of things which you can do yourself. But then you're also looking to see how can you help the environments that you're working with. So procurement's a very interesting place to be whenever you start getting into a sustainable policy, because you're the guys who go out and buy it. So it was my guys and girls and myself who had to go and buy this stuff. Yeah, so any materials we put into anything, and for those who aren't aware what Unilever makes, we make anything from food products to ice cream products. So you probably know about Magnums and certainly Ben & Jerry's, big sellers out there. All the laundry products, we make all those, and we make all the personal care products. So deodorants, skincare products, etc., etc. So if you're buying those materials for all over the globe, which is what I've done for the last 9 or 10 years, is I need to make sure that I buy it from sustainable sources. And I need to make sure that the people that I buy it off, I actually help them by buying this. I don't want anyone being in poverty trying to buy something or produce something which is very cheap. I want to make sure that what they buy, where they buy it or where they produce it, where they get their crops from, their families are all healthy, secure from what I'm doing. Because we're a multinational company, we need to be looking after the people we work with and our smallholders and the whole people down the supply chain. So that's what we're looking at every time we're buying a material.
Excellent. Yeah, I had written down, can you expand on the purchasing aspects of sustainability? But you covered that one pretty well.
I
Thank you
can
for
talk a
that.
lot more about that too, because it's a very interesting topic.
Oh, we're gonna get into it, believe me. So
Okay.
I do want to go into uh were you a part of any type of sustainability projects, long-term sustainability projects? And
Yes.
if so, how did you select a team? How did you prove the business case to your peers within Unilever, or anything else that you're currently doing from a sustainability perspective?
Okay. The first thing I'd say is it's not a project. Okay. It's got to be a way of life. It's got to be a way of doing business. Yeah. So it's much more than that. So if we talked about Unilever's sustainable living plan, that started about 10 years ago. I hope it's still going when I'm dead and buried. Yeah. So this is something that's constant. It's got to be what you do every single day when you go to work. So, but in terms of some of the areas that I've worked in, probably a couple of interesting ones maybe for those listening. So one big one that I did was on vanilla in Madagascar. So if you think of all the vanilla that goes into Magnums right across the globe, if you know Magnum ice creams, well, hopefully you do. You certainly know Ben and Jerry's, but so all the vanilla that goes in there, we need to make sure it comes from a sustainable source. And I got all my vanilla, and I spent a lot of money on it, put it that way. So we went to Madagascar. I went to Madagascar because I needed to see myself where I was getting this vanilla sourced from. So, very interesting place to go. I don't know if you guys have ever been, but it's one of those where it is really in the middle of nowhere, in the jungle, off the coast of Africa. Um, and what I'm basically looking at is the smallholders who produce this vanilla. I want to see how they do it. I want to see how they live. I want to see how their children live, whether their children go to school. And so we basically want to make sure that we give them enough. There's a lot of discussions about living wage and definitions, but I want to make sure that those smallholders do it properly, do it in a sustainable way, so that I know that I've got vanilla for forever, but everybody else has got vanilla forever as well. Yeah, so it's really important to do that. So what I'd always recommend to anyone who's getting into this as a career is make sure you see where these things come from. I think we'll talk about fashion later, but it's the principles are very much the same. You want to see where your products are produced, who they're produced by, and what sort of conditions are they produced by. So what sort of conditions are the people living in? So you can ask me anything about Madagascar and vanilla, but that is a really interesting area. And basically, once I'd been out there, I made sure that some of the very senior people in Unilever were aware of where we produce this, because there's more to be done in Madagascar, and we wanted to help Madagascar more wildly than just vanilla once we'd been in there. The other area that I did a lot of work on was on patchouli, and patchouli is in the fragrance business. So where that fits into my role, I basically was buying fragrances and flavors for the globe, and my team was buying that for me. And we spent about 1.5 billion. So it's a very large number. So I was responsible for that. So patchouli is something which goes into the fragrance business. So the fragrance goes into things like, probably the obvious ones are things like deodorants, but also in your skincare products, you've got some sort of fragrance in there, but also your laundry products, your softening products, they've all got some sort of fragrance in there. So patchouli is one of the products that is widely used in that sort of sector. So again, I went to Indonesia. I went around a lot of different areas of Indonesia to meet, again, the people who produce this patchouli, actually for the supplier who supplied the goods to me. So I was actually looking at my supplier's supplier. So I wasn't just making sure that my suppliers were sustainable. I wanted to make sure that the next layer was sustainable. So I spent with a couple of my colleagues about a week going around various parts of Indonesia, and again, checking out who's making this. One of the big things you look out for is child labor. Is there any child labor? Again, what are the conditions? What are the healthcare situation? What's the schooling like in these areas? And again, you've got to come out of those situations and those ventures, if you like, to make sure that everything is above board. It is being done correctly, and you're helping the communities by what you're doing, as opposed to just buying the cheapest product from the cheapest place in the world. That's not what you got to do. You got to do it correctly. And that's certainly what Unilever believe. And I personally believe it as well. So that works well. But Unilever believe that as well. You've got to do it sustainably from the right sources.
Excellent. Yeah, and you brought up an interesting point that we talk a lot about within supply chain management, in that in terms of visibility, in terms of sustainability tracking, you somewhat lose visibility whenever you get to those tier 2, tier 3 suppliers. So once we get past our direct suppliers, we kind of lose that visibility. So did Unilever do a lot with that to try to look at those suppliers, as you put it?
They did, because, and you can't do it all. The thing, let's be honest, you cannot do it all, because you've already got, I mean, I was working, fortunately in my area, I had a small number of suppliers, and I didn't want anybody else, and because I was in charge of it globally, I could make that decision. But I didn't want, 500 suppliers of vanilla. And some companies get to that sort of point because they can get it from different places at different prices, etc. I wanted a small number. Preferably, my suppliers were mostly global. But then, of course, yes, they have several suppliers right across the globe. So it can add up. But we tried to do it as much as possible. But the best way of doing it, we found, was to work with global suppliers wherever possible, who would then have a sustainability policy. And we could do we could go in and monitor and do audits against their sustainability policy, so that we knew that they were doing it. So as I say, you've got to take chunks yourself. You can't do everything yourself. So as long as we monitored them and they had to come to us and prove the fact that they were sustainable, then we didn't have to do it all ourselves. Yeah. So that's the best way I find of doing it. I will do the occasional audit myself, and that's why I had to do things like going to Indonesia, because I want to see it for myself. But you've got to work with big companies that you trust. And there's a big element of trust, and you've got to make sure they've got a sustainability policy. If they don't have a sustainability policy, they can't work with me, and they can't work with my peers in other categories.
Yeah, and that's what I like. And I mean, you brought up some excellent points there where, you're walking the talk, right? As a leader, you're walking the talk as a leader, you're going to see it for yourself. And the sustainability policies are very important. And essentially it all comes down to trust. But the most important thing you brought up is you are a man of many terms. Sustainability policy, I'm using that one. I've used the rocket science reference that you talked about in the roundtable discussion that we were on in the conference. I use that one often as well. I think that one maybe get replaced by the sustainability policy reference. Appreciate that one. So do you see, whenever you're going to different parts of the world, because this is one thing I speak to a lot of people about, do you see different expectations, different definitions, different levels of what's referred to as sustainability policies in different parts of the world?
I think there's obviously, you go to different parts of the world and it's very, very different environment. Okay, so if you're in a Western business, if I'm going to do an audit of a factory of a supplier in Western Europe or the US, the factory pretty much looks like a factory, and the standards are a certain level, and it's pretty much what you expect. You pretty much know before you walk in there what there's going to be. Now there's different levels. I've been to fantastic factories in Switzerland and Germany and Singapore and some places which are absolutely outstanding, and I've seen very poor factories in Europe as well. But they're none of them are absolutely awful. Yeah. Sometimes you go into places in Asia and the standards are very different. Just generally, I'm just talking about housekeeping standards, etc. But you sort of check out the environment you're in. So you get a bit of a feel for the place you're in. So if I'm in the middle of Indonesia, I don't necessarily expect everything to be the same. You know, it can be hotter, stickier, not a lot of air conditioning. Sometimes the lighting's not as good. But when it comes to sustainability, I don't think you can really just say you can have a different policy in one part of the world than another part. I don't think you can go there. I think your expectations should be the same. You know, once you've got an RSP, we call it the responsible sourcing policy. It should be the same for anywhere else, anywhere in the world. So people may have different views of it, but whether I buy it or not, it still has to hit my policy. Yeah, so it has to hit my, 10, 12 indicators, and they include fair working conditions, people having the right to have a decent wage, and how they're treated at work, and the fairness at work, et cetera, et cetera. It's all going to be there, whether it's in Indonesia or India or South Africa or somewhere else. It's still got to be there. So you can have different definitions, or people may talk about it in a different way, but overall, it's still got to hit that policy. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. So I want to get back to the people part, but I think that and this is one thing I talk a lot about in that we have these frameworks like the GRI framework, the SASB reporting and things like that. But within your experience, did you all do any kind of audits, any kind of sustainability audits for your business partners?
We did audits. So as I say, the responsible sourcing policy is an element of an audit.
Okay.
So what we tended to do is for our big suppliers, we would say, do you fit this policy? And I can send you a copy and your students a copy of what that RSP looks like, as we call it. So if it fits into that RSP, then yes, we will accept it. Almost the trust one, the first tick is to say yes. They can tell me that they have got a policy, got a sustainable policy, and they fit into our 10 aspects, for example. But we will then audit. As I say, I will expect my teams to have gone to my suppliers and had a check. So wherever it might be, again, in different parts of the world, I would expect them to have done something. You don't, you've got to build trust. You've got to build, because they are your partners, and they're global partners, and they last with you for a number of different years. So there is an element of trust. But yes, you will go to their factories wherever you can, and you will do some sort of assessment.
Okay, excellent.
Sorry, we've got all sorts of services running past me here, so I'm just muting occasionally.
It's okay. So going back to that people part, and whenever when certain people talk about sustainability, that's one of those aspects that is often overlooked. You did briefly talked about, the fair rate, fair wages and the ethical treatment of workers and things like that. But can you expand on the people aspect of sustainability a bit more?
Yeah, I mean, let me go back to Madagascar. So I'll give you a bit of an example. So whenever you go back to a part of the world like that, what you're trying to do with the people is you're trying to make sure that and it's a very interesting one, vanilla, because I'll give you a bit of context. So if you don't do vanilla, what you tend to do is rice, okay? Because you've got to feed your whole family, extended family, etc. If you start to play around with rice, if you like, because it could have a better price for it than vanilla, then the way to make rice is you've got to clear land. You've actually got to burn down part of the rainforest to be able to produce rice. Okay, so if you're doing that sort of thing, that's obviously not good for anything to do with the environment. So actually, you're trying to give them enough money on something like vanilla so that they make more than they would do from rice. So it's got to be something which makes them enough that they want to do it. Yeah, so there's almost a basic point to that. So that's almost the first thing to say. Then when you see that they are working for you, I want the standards to be excellent. So if it's going in my Magnum, the standard of that vanilla has got to be excellent. So therefore, the point is that you want them to want to do it, but you also want the whole family to be involved. And in certain parts of the world, not everywhere, you can't do these things everywhere, but in certain parts of the world, what you're trying to do is support both the smallholder and the family. So that's where you can get into things like schooling. That's where you can get into things like healthcare locally. Yeah. So you're going that little bit further, which means that they really want to work with you and they will get you excellent products and it will be sustainable going forward. So that's the sort of the people element. Again, this is almost a part of do you audit? It's almost the stage of when you go and see these people, suddenly they want to work for you much more because it's very unusual. You know, a white guy from Ireland walking into, some of these jungles and meeting, smallholders who are working their hearts out to try and make some money for their family. If you're actually there and appreciate what they're doing, it's amazing how much extra they'll do for you. So there's this whole element of it. Working with people really means that they support you afterwards. Probably the fact I brought some magnums with me as well and said, take some home, and that also helps. But
right.
So there's an appreciation, that you're actually interested in what they're doing. Yeah, and this happens everywhere. It happens in every walk of life, but it certainly happens in the more remote areas because it's unusual.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, and the thing is, it's like you said, it's not rocket science, right? It's just being human.
Absolutely.
It's just being there, going to see what those people are doing. Getting their input. Say, how can I help?
Yeah.
It's like we talk about this in sustainability, but we're just being human.
Absolutely.
And we're taking the money out of it.
Yeah.
And it's like we make this so complicated, but it's so simple.
And I think just the other point in this is at times we can help in terms of, we do what we did do in terms of Unilever. We did bring in some specialists.
Mm-hmm.
So we did bring in expertise. So from sustainability point of view, we have got people who have come from big organizations, people from WWF, other big, charitable type organizations. So people who know what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But also we brought in crop specialists, so people who really understand. So whenever you say, we want to help, we can help in lots of different ways. So you're helping by being there. So there's the whole human side. But also, if we can improve their crops, so I can ring up one of my specialists. I'm not one of the specialists. I'm a procurement guy or a supply chain guy, but I can ring somebody and say, look, or video this and say, how do we make these crops work better for these people? And that helps as well, because you can make it more efficient, more effective. So if you make their crops more 20% better, okay, that's great for everybody. So there's more that you can add by the specialism as well as the human side.
Excellent. So you brought up a good point in terms of the specialist, but if we have a small and medium enterprise, a $5 million company, a $2 million company,
That's still quite big compared to local.
That's true too. You got me on that one.
Yeah.
But if they want to create this sustainability mindset, this sustainability environment within their organization, how do they start if they are constrained, by resources, constrained by capital to bring in these big time consultants and people with this level of expertise?
But they're not consultants. That's almost the first thing to say. They are people that you employ.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Unilever employ people to help out in this area, and that they're passionate about it. And again, I can send something to you and your class and your students, because there are things which we do nearly every 6 months. There's a new video comes out And the nice thing is that people are very passionate about it. So you can see it in the videos. But I think, you know, if you have got a drive for it and you've got the leadership for it and your company's talking about it, you've almost got to sell that a little bit. But there's enough people coming through universities who are absolutely passionate about the subject. So therefore, if you publicize a little bit of, particularly if you say, look, I don't know it all, I want to go in this direction, I want to go in the sustainable direction, however, I need help. You know, if you're someone of, you know, middle-aged people like me, you know, who may not have been through it all, you know, the point of trying to get people out of university who are passionate about this, they will probably want to join you as long as they believe that that's really the direction you want to go in. Yeah. So if you've got a passion for it as a leader or a small business owner, then you can get people who are equally passionate and probably know more about the topic, who can join you or would like to join you. So I think you can sell it. I think you can sell it, your company, and get people in because they want to help generally.
Mm-hmm. Great. So with all of this stuff that we talked about, you know, how would this be transferable to the apparel industry or the fashion industry?
Funny enough, I talk quite a lot about foods there, but the fragrance side of the business is actually, that's almost one of the sexiest parts of Unilever, if you like. Yeah. So you might be surprised about that. But things like skincare, so personal care. Mm-hmm. So the whole personal care sector with your deodorants and your skincare and everything else is actually one that people wanted to get very much involved in. Marketeers love it, R&D love it, senior management always loved it. So they want to get involved with the sort of the fragrance, they're called fragrance houses. Yeah, the fragrance houses, because they see them as trendsetters, because they do work with the Gucci's and the Tom Fords and all these guys. They also work with them. So they work with us on a laundry product, but they will work at really high-end fragrances. So there's quite a lot of a similarity here. So in terms of trends and trend setting, you know, it's quite similar. I'll give you a quick story of the guy who used to be the president of personal care globally. One of the first things he said to me was, can you take me on a tour, Tour, that's my Irish accent.
I was trying to figure that one out.
But he basically said, these guys are trendsetters. You know, the fragrance companies know a lot about what's happening in the world. So take me for a trip around, and I took him around London, and I took him to Paris, and we went to New York, and we had a look at all sorts of things which were going on in terms of new stores, which were included new trends in terms of fragrances, but also, you know, high-end clothes shops and that sort of stuff. We did all that. We had a look at all that. So there's a similarity between the industries. But what I'd say in terms of the fashion industry, I would say exactly the same as I think about with foods or fragrance products. You should go and see what's being produced for you. Where does it come from? Who's making that for you? And you got to have a bit of a gut reaction as a buyer, particularly if you're into the sustainability field. You don't go for the lowest cost. If you go for something, when you look at it and you say, this seems too good to be true. Well, if it sounds like it's too good to be true, it normally is. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you've got to look behind that, and you've got to discover, where does this come from? So it may be it could be a high-end fashion, or it could be low-end fashion, you know, which tends to be copies of the high end. Mm-hmm. But if it's super cheap product, you've got to ask yourself, how can this product be so cheap? You know, and I would always do that. Why is this so cheap? If this is now in the fashion industry, you know, I've got two girls here, 19 and 21, both at university here in the UK. You know, they'll buy fashion items, but again, you got to say, well, what price did you pay for that? And right. To me, my view is, if it's that low, hey, come on, where did you get that from? So where is it sourced from? Who made that? Where did they make it? You know, and then you got to ask a lot of questions. So I think it's very similar. The industries are similar from that point of view. You've got to question it, but also from the high end. Again, I'm not putting all my views on high end or low end, but you know, again, for the high end, again, where do they source these things from? It's the same question. It could be from a really good source. Could be they could have a, some of the businesses will talk about sustainability in their policy or in their strategy. But if they do, then great. But again, you need to check. You need to check behind. Where did it happen? So it's an audit. Go and see yourself. Go and see yourself and see what you think. So do your research. You can do your research. A lot of your research you can do on Google. You go deeper and deeper and deeper. But fundamentally, if you can do, if it's possible, then go and have a look yourself.
Okay, excellent. So as we're wrapping up, what advice would you give entrepreneurs that are moving into the sustainability space, or what have been some of the lessons learned in your career?
I think one of the first things is, if you're going to be a leader in it, then you've got to be authentic. Like if you want to be a leader anywhere, you've got to be authentic anyway. So if you're going to be in the sustainability area, you've got to mean it. Yeah. So people will see through you very quickly. So if you talk about it because you think it's a bit of a fad, it's an area where we should be because other companies are doing well, then make sure you meet it, because if you don't meet it, you'll be found out. So that's a key one. I would say the second one is, you've got to do it yourself. You've got to make sure, again, I talked a little bit about going to see things yourself, but make sure your company is going in the right direction. So if you've got manufacturing sites, for example, make sure your manufacturing sites are hitting some of these environmental policies that you're asking other people to do. So what are your waste levels? What your greenhouse gases? What are you producing from your factories? What's your water usage? Make sure, before you go and start attacking other people for not getting it right, make sure you get it right yourself. So there's a big element of that. There's also something which I think is a learning, is you can't always persuade all your consumers to go with you. So, for example, if I think about Unilever, water usage, we make a lot of products for showers. So you're having a shower every morning, whatever. You can make a product which you think is quite sustainable. You're using the right ingredients. You're trying to use the right sort of plastic, so a reusable plastic. You're trying to lightweight it, so you're using less of it. And you might even compress it, so that the amount that you're using each day is a very small amount. So again, it's better for the environment. However, if somebody sits in the shower for 30 minutes, you haven't done a great job. So it's quite difficult sometimes to actually persuade your consumer to be as sustainable as you're trying to be. So, and I think it's a bit of a learning over the years that we've really tried to push this, but it doesn't always work. It doesn't always work. But keep pushing, because the more you talk about it, the more you use your marketeers as well. Use your marketeers, put the advertising in there, which is the right sort of advertising of why they should be using it, the wonderful product, but somehow attach that to water usage. Use this is fantastic, but don't do that. But do it in a way which is, energizing to them, as opposed to, you're being told off. So bring your consumers with you. I think that's a big point probably in the fashion industry. Are people just always going to wear fur coats at the highest price or whatever? I don't know. You want to have some sort of angle in there to try and persuade them, but persuade them in something which is energizing and is in the right way. Put it that way, so that they know they're doing things in the right way. The specialist, I think, is a big one. You do want to bring specialists in, but you also want to make sure that it's not all about numbers, because there's a big thing in all of the big companies. Unilever have it the same. One of the first things they say is measure it. So it's really important to measure. Otherwise, you've got a great goal out there, but if you don't measure it, then you never know whether it's happened. My old chief procurement officer always said to me, this whole thing about, if you don't have a target for it, it's never going to be met. Okay, so it's really important. But if you're a specialist and you're passionate about this, some of these things don't happen overnight. Now, I haven't got a lot of patience for this either, but some things, like if you're trying to do something in palm oil, in Indonesia or Malaysia or something, you can't turn a whole industry in 3 months.
Mhm.
So your numbers may not, you may have a target to hit it in within a year. It may take 3 years. So don't always think, oh my God, this is going to be a complete disaster. Force it, push it all you can do. But the numbers, sometimes you think you feel the pressure of the numbers as opposed to pressure of doing the right thing, if you get my meaning. So hopefully the measurement is the right thing anyway, but don't get too disheartened if it doesn't happen in day 1 or day 3 or day 5. It may take 3 years to do something, but keep pushing it, keep passionate about it, keep energized by it. So I think that's a big role of leadership, particularly when you've got people who've come in from outside who are massively passionate about the topic. It doesn't happen necessarily as quickly as people would like, but keep pushing and it will happen. And I think the thing I'd say is Unilever Sustainable Living Plan started 10 years ago, and the numbers have been incredible internally. I could roll out off a load of numbers to you at another time, but they have been very impressive. But there's still a long way to go with this, and we need to keep pushing at it.
Excellent. This has been an amazing discussion. I always love having discussions with you. So how can people find you?
They can find me. Well, the easiest way to find me is in LinkedIn. I work for a company called the Partnering Group now, and a lot of the things that I do is now show companies how to work with big, mostly suppliers. So build big strategic relationships, how they partner with them in terms of their marketing, their innovation. But sustainability is a big part of it, and I think if you're really, most of the businesses I'm talking to now, and most of them are big blue chip companies or large organizations, and a lot of them very, thankfully are going in the right direction. A lot of them aren't, but a lot of them are, and I tend to work with ones who are. But building the big relationships is a big part of it. And if you can get your supplier, your big partner to be sustainable in the same way as you are, that can make a big difference. And resilience, we've talked about resilience before. Resilience is another big part of it. How you actually look at the potential for major crises across the world, COVID, bird flu, SARS, lots of other things, but how you work with the suppliers so you support each other in these difficult times, but do it in a sustainable way. So sustainable business is a big part of what we discuss, and we've discussed it before. But yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn's the easiest way. I'm on the Partnering Group, but I'm Pete McMorris, and you'll find me in there. You'll see my life history in the business, and I'll also put a number of posts out these days, so you'll see other things that I'm involved in if you're interested. So you can get in touch with me, and you can have a chat whenever you like.
Yeah, so yeah, please take Peter up on that offer. He can have a chat, and you'll hear some of the great sayings he says, some of the great quotes. I have about 3 or 4 written down here from this discussion. So Peter, thanks for our discussion, and everyone else, until next time.
Thank you, Justin.
Yep, see y'all.